The waves roll gently against the sand, each one glowing silver under the pale light of the moon. The night air was warm, salted with the scent of the sea, carrying whispers of the tide across the empty shoreline. Lila walked barefoot, her sandals dangling loosely from her fingers, the grains of sand clinging to her skin like a secret she couldn't quite shake. She had come here for quiet, for escape. The beach was her refuge, the one place where her thoughts didn't press so heavy against her. But tonight, there was something different in the air. A tension she couldn't name. The horizon stretched endlessly before her, and for a moment she thought she was completely alone until she saw him. A figure stood a few meters ahead, half in shadow, half bathed in the glow of the moon. Tall, broad-shouldered, his shirt fluttered lightly in the breeze. He wasn't moving, only gazing out at the sea as though it held all the answers he was looking for. Lila slowed, curiosity pulling at her. She wasn't used to sharing her solitude. When he finally turned, she felt her breath catch. His eyes, even at this distance, seemed sharp-lit with something that made her chest tighten. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't demand attention but commanded it all the same. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice carrying smoothly over the hush of waves. "You didn't," she lied, brushing a strand of hair from her face, though her heart betrayed her with its sudden rhythm. He tilted his head, studying her like she was part of the ocean itself. "Strange to find someone else walking here at night. This beach doesn't belong to many after sunset." "Maybe that's why I like it," she replied, surprising herself with the way her words sounded bolder than she felt. He stepped closer, and the space between them shifted, charged with a kind of energy she hadn't expected. Lila could hear the sand crunch softly beneath his feet as he approached, could see the way the moonlight carved along his jaw, strong and certain. "I'm Adrian," he said, extending a hand. Her fingers slipped into his, and warmth rushed up her arm, leaving her cheeks flushed. "Lila." His grip lingered just long enough to make her pulse race before he let go. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but silence never felt so full. "What brings you here?" he asked finally, his voice low, almost coaxing. She hesitated. The truth was messy, and she wasn't ready to spill her secrets to a stranger with eyes that saw too much. "I like the quiet. The night makes the world softer." Adrian's lips curved slightly, as though he understood more than she was willing to share. "Same reason I come here. Except," his gaze swept over her, deliberate, lingering just enough to stir heat under her skin. "Tonight doesn't feel so quiet anymore." Lila's breath caught, her heart beat louder than the sea. She should have turned back, should have kept walking, but something about him held her in place. Something magnetic. They walked together after that, not saying much, the space between their arms brushing now and then. Each accidental touch made the air heavier, charged, as though the night itself was conspiring to push them closer. When they stopped at the edge of the tide, Adrian looked at her again, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning with something she couldn't ignore. The waves licked over their feet, cool against skin suddenly fevered. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured. Her lips parted, but no words came. She only nodded, her throat too tight to form the answer. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of his body cut through the night air. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but close enough that every nerve in her body screamed for more. The sea roared, the night hummed, and Lila realized that this beach would never feel the same again. The tide crept higher, lapping around their ankles, but Lila barely noticed. Adrian's presence pressed against her senses more fiercely than the sea itself. She wanted to look away, to break whatever spell was tightening around her chest, but his gaze pinned her in place. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said finally, though his voice carried no warning, only curiosity. "And yet, so are you," she countered softly. The corner of his mouth curved, that almost smile again, and it stirred something in her that she wasn't ready to name. He was different from anyone she had met before, not just in the way he looked, but in the way he felt. There was a weight to him, a quiet strength that seemed both dangerous and safe all at once. They stood together in silence, listening to the rush of waves and the distant cry of gulls who hadn't yet gone to sleep. The night stretched wide around them, but for Lila, it narrowed until only he remained. "Walk with me," Adrian said, tilting his head down the shoreline. Her first instinct was to say no, to retreat back into the safe cocoon of solitude she always carried. But her lips betrayed her. "All right." They moved side by side, their steps falling into rhythm as though they had walked this beach together 100 times before. The sand was cool now, the breeze a little stronger, whipping her hair across her face. Adrian reached out without hesitation, brushing the strand away with his fingers. The touch was brief, innocent even, but it sent warmth spiraling down her spine. Lila's heart fluttered wildly. Why him? Why now? She thought. She had come here tonight to quiet her restless mind, not to find someone who unsettled her even more. "What do you see when you look at the ocean?" he asked suddenly, his voice low and thoughtful. Lila blinked, startled by the question. "I see, freedom. Something endless. Something that doesn't care about the things that break us." Adrian studied her face as she spoke, his eyes holding her as tightly as his words did. "Freedom," he repeated. "I see it too. But I also see power. The kind that can either cradle you or destroy you." She shivered, not from the wind, but from the way his words seemed to echo inside her chest. As they walked, their hands brushed again, and this time, neither of them pulled away. Fingers lingered, testing, teasing. Lila's skin burned where they touched, a slow fire that spread until she was almost trembling. Adrian glanced down at her, his eyes darkened with something unspoken. "You feel it, don't you?" Her lips parted, her breath shallow. She wanted to deny it, to retreat behind the walls she always kept around her heart, but honesty slipped out before she could stop it. "Yes." The word hung between them, delicate and dangerous. They stopped walking. The world seemed to still, the only sound the crash of waves and the steady thud of her heart. Adrian reached out again, his fingertips grazing her wrist, tracing a line up her arm as though memorizing the shape of her. The touch was soft, reverent, yet charged with enough intensity to make her knees weaken. Lila had never been one to believe in destiny or chance encounters, yet standing there with him felt inevitable. Like the tide, like the pull of the moon, something beyond her control. "Why do I feel like I've known you longer than a few minutes?" she whispered, half to herself. Adrian's lips curved again, but this time, there was no smile in it, only longing. "Because some connections don't care about time." Her chest tightened, her breath unsteady. She could feel the weight of his nearness, the way the air itself seemed to draw them closer. The urge to close the distance, to surrender to whatever this was, grew too strong to ignore. And then, just as the moment teetered on the edge of something more, a sudden gust of wind rose, scattering sand across the shoreline. Lila gasped, blinking against it, and when she looked back at Adrian, his expression had shifted, guarded now, almost conflicted. I shouldn't, he started, then stopped, his jaw tightening. You shouldn't what? She pressed, her voice trembling. Adrian hesitated, his hand still hovering near hers, the warmth of it making her ache. Stay. The word cut through her, sharp and cold, even as every part of her begged him not to walk away. But before she could reply, he took a step back, his eyes searching hers with something that looked like regret. Good night, Lila. And just like that, he turned, his figure retreating into the shadows of the beach, leaving her with the roar of the sea and the pounding of her own heart. The night after Adrian disappeared into the shadows, Lila couldn't sleep. She tossed in her bed, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the distant crash of waves she knew by heart. Yet, every sound reminded her of him, his voice, his touch, the way his gaze had unsettled her. It wasn't supposed to matter. He was a stranger. A fleeting face on a stretch of lonely sand. But his presence clung to her, sharper than memory, heavier than a dream. By dawn, her frustration had grown unbearable. She threw on a dress and walked back to the beach, hoping against reason that he would still be there. But the shoreline stretched out empty, the tide erasing any footprints that might have proved he was real. Why did he leave? She wondered, staring at the endless horizon. And why does it feel like something is pulling me back to him? The next few days passed in a blur. She returned to the beach every evening, pacing the same stretch of sand, her eyes searching the shadows. Some part of her hated the obsession building inside, but another part deeper, truer surrendered to it. On the fourth night, she finally saw him again. He was standing near the rocks this time, his silhouette outlined by the silver moon. Lila's chest tightened, relief rushing through her like a tide. She moved toward him without hesitation, her bare feet carrying her across the cool sand. You left, she said, the words sharper than she intended. Adrian turned, his expression unreadable, though his eyes flickered with something she couldn't miss. I had to. Why? She pressed, stepping closer, her voice trembling. He looked away, toward the waves crashing at his feet. Because some things are dangerous to want. Her heart stuttered. Is that what this is? Dangerous? Adrian's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, but the silence told her enough. Lila closed the gap between them, defying the warning in his tone, in his posture. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the sharp pull of gravity that seemed to lock her in place. I don't care, she whispered. I can't stop thinking about you. His head turned sharply, eyes locking onto hers, dark and intense. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then, with a slow exhale, Adrian reached for her hand. The contact was electric. His fingers laced through hers, strong and steady, and she felt the world narrow once more. You shouldn't have said that, he murmured, though his grip only tightened. Maybe I should have said it sooner, she shot back, her courage rising with the pounding of her heart. The tension between them crackled like a storm about to break. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath on her skin. His free hand lifted, brushing her cheek with a touch so careful it made her tremble. Lila, he said softly, almost like a warning. Her voice shook, but she didn't waver. Don't stop. Something shifted in his eyes, then the guard he had been holding slipped, and raw longing surfaced in its place. His hand slid along her jaw, down the curve of her neck, leaving fire in its path. Every nerve in her body lit up, her breath quickening, her chest rising against the space between them. She thought he might kiss her then, and for a suspended moment, the world felt ready to shatter. But instead, Adrian pulled her closer until his forehead rested against hers. His eyes closed, his breathing uneven. "This shouldn't be happening," he whispered. "And yet, it is," she replied, her voice barely audible. The waves roared louder, crashing violently against the rocks, as if the sea itself was echoing the storm inside them. Adrian's hands lingered, torn between restraint and surrender. Lila tilted her head, her lips brushing against the edge of his, a feather-light touch that sent a shock through them both. Adrian drew in a sharp breath, his body tensing, and for a moment, she thought he would finally give in. But instead, he pulled back, his hands sliding away as though the effort pained him. His eyes met hers, burning, tortured. "You don't know what you're asking for." Lila's chest ached with the sudden absence of his touch, but she stood her ground. "Then tell me. Let me understand." But Adrian only shook his head, stepping away once more. "Some truths are heavier than you can carry." And before she could stop him, he turned again, walking into the darkness, leaving her breathless, her heart a wild storm. Yet this time, she knew she wouldn't let him slip away so easily. Lila couldn't shake the way Adrian's words clung to her. Some truths are heavier than you can carry. They haunted her for days, echoing in the quiet moments, slipping between her thoughts when she tried to focus on anything else. She replayed every glance, every brush of his hand, every unfinished moment that had sparked and then been smothered by his restraint. Her chest burned with questions, but beneath them all was one undeniable truth: she wanted him. By the sixth night, she gave up pretending. She returned to the beach, her heart pounding with every step, unsure if she was searching for answers or for him. And there he was. Adrian stood by the water again, his shirt undone at the collar, the moonlight painting his figure in silver and shadow. The sight of him nearly stole her breath. He looked both unreachable and achingly close, like the tide itself, sometimes retreating, sometimes crashing forward. This time, she didn't hesitate. She marched toward him, determination fueling her steps. "You can't keep walking away," she said, her voice firm, though her heart fluttered wildly. He turned, surprise flashing across his face before it softened into something darker, heavier. "Lila, no," she cut him off, stepping closer, close enough that the salty breeze carried his warmth. "I don't care how dangerous this is, or what you think you're protecting me from. I can't stand this in between. You want me, and her voice wavered, but she forced the words out. "I want you too." The air thickened between them, charged, alive. Adrian's jaw clenched, his eyes burning into hers as though he was fighting every instinct in his body. "You don't understand what you're saying," he muttered, but his hands betrayed him. They rose slowly, hesitating in the space between them, before finally cupping her face. The moment his skin touched hers, everything inside her ignited. His palms were warm, steady, grounding her even as the world tilted beneath her feet. Lila leaned into him, her breath catching, her lips only a breath away from his. "I don't need to understand," she whispered. "I just need you." For a heartbeat, he froze. Then the restraint shattered. Adrian's mouth captured hers with sudden urgency, the kiss deep and consuming. It wasn't gentle, it was fire meeting fire, fierce and raw. Lila melted into him, her hands clutching at his shirt as if she could pull him closer, as if even the closeness they shared wasn't enough. The world around them vanished. The crash of waves faded, the stars overhead blurred, and all that remained was the heat of his mouth, the strength of his arms wrapping around her. She felt his heartbeat hammering against her chest, wild and unrestrained, matching the storm raging inside her. When he finally broke away, his forehead rested against hers, his breath ragged. His eyes glimmered with something like hunger, but also fear. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered, though his hands still clung to her, refusing to let go. Lila's lips trembled, swollen from his kiss, her chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. "Then why did you?" His jaw tightened, and for a long moment, he didn't answer. Finally, his voice came low, almost broken. "Because I can't stay away from you." Her heart soared, her body aching with the truth she had been waiting to hear. She pressed closer, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, memorizing every curve and edge. "Then don't." Adrian closed his eyes, as though her words cut deeper than she realized. "You don't know what I've done, Lila. You don't know the things I carry. If you did, you'd run from me." But she shook her head, firm and unyielding. "I'm not afraid of your shadows." He looked at her then, really looked, as though her defiance cracked something inside him. His thumb brushed over her cheekbone, tender now, almost reverent. "You should be." The weight in his tone sent a chill through her, but it only fueled her determination. Whatever secrets he held, whatever past he feared, she needed to know. She needed him. Before she could press further, he pulled her into his arms again, holding her tightly as though the act itself was dangerous. She buried her face against his chest, hearing the thunder of his heartbeat, feeling the tremor in his breath. The ocean roared behind them, the night wrapped around them, and in that moment, Lila knew one thing with absolute certainty: whatever truth Adrian carried, she would face it. She would not let him slip away again. Lila didn't let him go. Adrian's words, his warnings, his shadows, they only bound her tighter to him. She could feel the heat of his body against hers, the way his hands lingered on her back as if he couldn't decide whether to hold her close or push her away. Finally, she pulled back enough to see his face. His eyes burned with conflict, with a fire he kept trying to extinguish but couldn't. "Tell me," she said softly. "Tell me what you're so afraid of." His jaw clenched, his gaze darting to the restless waves as though the ocean itself might answer for him. For a long moment, the only sound between them was the crash of water and the hammering of her heart. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, rough. "I wasn't always the man you see standing here. I've done things I'm not proud of. Things that don't leave me, no matter how far I run." Lila searched his face, but all she saw was pain, layered deep beneath his strength. "What things?" His eyes flickered, shadows crossing them. "Choices. Violence. A life I thought I wanted until it consumed me." The admission struck her, but instead of fear, she felt only a sharper pull toward him. She had known from the beginning there was danger in his gaze, in the weight he carried, but hearing it didn't make her step back. It made her ache for him. "You think that makes you unworthy of this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adrian's hand lifted, brushing against her cheek as though she were something fragile. "It makes me afraid of destroying it." Her breath hitched, her skin burning under his touch. The way he looked at her like she was light he wasn't allowed to touch ignited something fierce inside her. "You won't destroy me," she whispered. "You don't get to decide that." His restraint cracked again, and before either of them could think, his mouth was on hers. The kiss was deeper this time, rough with desperation, hungry with need. Lila melted into it, clutching at him, her body pressed against his as though she might fuse with him completely. The world dissolved again. The salt air, the roar of waves, the chill of the night, they all blurred into nothing but heat, but fire, but the magnetic pull of him. When they finally broke apart, their breaths ragged, Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his chest heaving. "You don't know how dangerous I am to you," he murmured. "Then let me find out for myself," she said, her voice unyielding despite the tremor in her body. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers, looking for fear. But he didn't find it. Instead, he found defiance, longing, and something even stronger, trust. Adrian's expression shifted, softening in a way she hadn't seen before. For a moment, he looked vulnerable, almost fragile. "You don't understand, Lila. I've walked in darkness so long that I don't remember what it feels like to live without it. And yet, when I'm with you," he trailed off, his throat tightening. "When you're with me," she pressed gently. His eyes closed briefly, his hands tightening at her waist as though he was anchoring himself. "When I'm with you, it feels like light. And it terrifies me." Lila's heart ached at his words, but it also swelled with something fierce. She lifted her hand to his face, her thumb brushing his jaw, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Then be terrified. I'm not letting you go." The raw honesty between them burned hotter than any touch. She felt the tremor in his breath, the battle raging inside him, and she knew she had struck the heart of it. Adrian bent down again, his lips hovering over hers, his voice a whisper lost in the night. "You're going to break me. Or save you," she whispered back. The kiss that followed was slower, deeper, full of both surrender and promise. His hands held her as though he couldn't bear to release her, his body pressed to hers with a need that words couldn't carry. Every heartbeat, every breath, every brush of lips and hands only pulled them deeper into the tide of each other. When they finally parted, the moon hung high above, watching, silent witness to the storm they had unleashed. And though the night was still, Lila knew with certainty, Adrian's shadows weren't done with them yet. The days that followed blurred into nights, and the nights blurred into something even more dangerous. Lila found herself returning to the beach again and again, always searching, always waiting. And Adrian was there. Sometimes standing alone in the shadows, sometimes sitting on the rocks, watching the tide with the kind of haunted stillness that made her ache. And always, when their eyes met, the world shrank to nothing but the two of them. Every meeting burned hotter than the last. His hand brushing hers as they walked, the way his gaze lingered on her lips before he pulled away, the kisses that grew longer, deeper, until her body trembled from the fire of them. He was a storm wrapped in restraint, and she was the tide, crashing against him again and again. But in every touch, in every kiss, there was hesitation. A shadow lurking in the edges of his eyes. One evening, as the sun sank low and the first stars lit the sky, Lila finally pressed him. "You keep holding back," she whispered, her hand gripping his shirt as though daring him to deny it. "You kiss me like I'm everything you've been searching for, and then you stop, like you're afraid of yourself. Why?" Adrian's breath came sharp, his jaw tightening. He pulled away, pacing toward the waves, his figure a silhouette against the silver horizon. "Because I know what follows me, Lila. And I know it won't stop until it finds me." Her chest tightened. "What do you mean?" He turned sharply, his eyes fierce. "I wasn't just a man with bad choices. I was a man who belonged to people who don't forgive. Who don't forget." His voice was low, edged with something raw. "And if they find me, they'll destroy anything close to me. Including you. The air between them stilled, heavy with the weight of his confession. For the first time, true fear pressed against her ribs, not of him, but of losing him. "You think pushing me away will protect me," she said quietly. "It's the only way," he muttered, his fists curling at his sides. But Lila stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. "You don't get to decide that for me. I know the risk, and I don't care. Adrian, I'd rather face the storm with you than spend my life wondering what it would have been like to love you." His face twisted, torn between desperation and longing. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." Her hand lifted, cupping his cheek, her thumb brushing his jawline. "You think your shadows define you, but they don't. I've seen who you are when you're with me. And I'm not afraid." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The waves hushed, the stars stilled, and Adrian's breath caught as her words broke through his defenses. Then the dam shattered. He pulled her against him, his lips crashing onto hers in a kiss that was no longer hesitant but fierce, desperate, consuming. Lila melted into it, her hands clutching at his shoulders, her body burning under the intensity of his need. His arms wrapped around her, holding her as though she was the only thing anchoring him to the world. The kiss deepened, carrying everything they hadn't said, everything they feared, everything they wanted. Her knees weakened, and he lifted her slightly, his strength effortless, his touch both protective and possessive. When he finally tore his lips from hers, his forehead pressed against hers, his breath ragged. "You're going to undo me," he whispered, voice trembling with both desire and dread. "Then let me," she breathed back. For the first time, he didn't argue. But even as they held each other, the horizon flickered with distant lightning. The storm he had warned her of wasn't just metaphor anymore, it was real, and it was coming. Adrian tightened his hold on her, his eyes scanning the dark edges of the shore, sharp and alert. "Promise me, Lila. If the past finds me, you run." Her heart ached, but she shook her head fiercely. "I'm not leaving you." He kissed her again, softer this time, almost desperate, as though he already knew the storm was closer than either of them wanted to believe. And somewhere beyond the waves, shadows were already moving. The storm broke the following night. The air was heavy, the sky bruised with clouds, and the ocean roared louder than usual. Lila felt it before she saw it, the shift in Adrian's stance, the sharpness in his gaze as they walked along the shoreline. He was no longer just the haunted man who kissed her like she was salvation, he was a soldier bracing for a war. "They've found me," he said quietly, his voice steady but laced with dread. Lila's chest tightened. "Who?" "The ones I told you about," Adrian murmured. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the dunes, his body taut, ready. "They don't forgive. They don't leave loose ends." Fear rippled through her, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she stepped closer, slipping her hand into his. "Then we face them together." Adrian's eyes burned as he looked at her, torn between fury at her defiance and awe at her courage. "Lila, no," she cut him off, her grip firm. "Don't tell me to run." "I won't. Not from you." Before he could answer, shadows emerged from the edge of the beach, three figures moving with predatory calm, their presence heavier than the storm above. Lila's breath caught, but Adrian stepped in front of her, his body a shield. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice low but commanding. She clutched at his arm but obeyed, her heart hammering as the men closed in. One of them laughed, a sharp sound against the roar of the waves. "We told you, Adrian. You don't get to just walk away." Adrian's body tensed, his hand flexing at his side. "And I told you," he growled, "I'm done with that life." The man sneered. "Then you die with her." Lila's blood froze. But before fear could root her to the spot, Adrian surged forward. The fight was quick, brutal, lit by flashes of lightning overhead. Adrian moved like the tide itself, controlled, powerful, unstoppable. But for every strike he landed, every figure he forced back, she could see the danger pressing closer, the risk of losing him slicing sharper than any blade. "Adrian," she cried as one of the men lunged with a knife. He twisted, catching the attacker's arm, but not before the blade grazed his side. He staggered, pain flashing across his face, but he didn't stop. With a final blow, he sent the man crashing to the sand. The others hesitated, their confidence shaken. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling over them like a war drum. The men retreated into the darkness, their parting threat carried on the storm. "This isn't over." The beach fell silent again, save for the wild roar of the ocean. Adrian collapsed to his knees, clutching his side. Lila rushed to him, her hands trembling as she pressed against the wound. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," he rasped, though his face was pale. Tears burned her eyes, but she held him tighter, her voice fierce. "Don't you dare leave me. Not now. Not after everything." His hand rose weakly, brushing against her cheek, smearing salt and tears together. "You should hate me for bringing this to you." "I don't," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. "I love you." The words spilled out before she could stop them, raw and unguarded. Adrian froze, his breath shuddering. Then his eyes closed, and for the first time, his restraint broke completely, not from fear or passion, but from surrender. "God, Lila. I love you too." The storm raged around them, rain beginning to pour, soaking their skin, mixing with the blood and the salt. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was the way he kissed her then, desperate, hungry, alive. A kiss that tasted of pain and promise, of endings and beginnings. When he pulled back, his forehead pressed to hers, his voice was hoarse but steady. "I'll fight them all, if it means I get to keep this." "Keep you?" Lila's arms tightened around him, her heart burning brighter than the storm. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes." The waves crashed higher, lightning streaked the sky, but in that moment, they were untouchable. Two souls bound by fire and tide, shadows and light. Nights on the beach had brought them together. But it was the storm that had sealed them, forever.